Fellas, everyone's been making their fantasy UFC 300 cards filled with stacked fighters. I've done one myself, but today I'm going to be making a cursed UFC 300 card, kind of like a fantasy matchup. Now, what is a cursed UFC 300 card? Now, essentially, this is going to be filled with matchups that make sense, but in some sort of way. So, for example, it could be between fighters that have beef. It could be just an absolute berserk matchup that you'd never expect. It could be fights that have fallen through multiple times, as I'm going to show you in the first fight. But yeah, I'm going to be doing the prelim headliner all the way to, well, the entire main card. Let me know if I missed any cursed matchups out, but you'll understand what I mean pretty quickly. And we're going to go in there with the first fight, which is a prelim headliner of Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, the reason this is classed as a cursed matchup is, well, first of all, this fight has been, booked 5 times, and it's fallen through 5 times. I genuinely believe you could book this fight 100 times, and it would be cancelled 100 times, and that's the reason it's on the prelim as a headliner, is because it's going to sell pay-per-views, right? If this fight was on the card, it's going to sell a couple 100,000 pay-per-views additional to the rest of the card. It's a massive fight. Usually it'll be a main event for a pay-per-view, but the reason it's on the prelim headliner is because it's going to get cancelled. We don't want to ruin the main card by cancelling the fight, so we're going to get it on the prelim, so people are going to be aware of this fight. People are going to be buying the pay-per-views. The casuals are going to be interested, but the fight's not going to happen. Whether it's Tony Ferguson tripping over a wire, or someone gets coronavirus, or someone gets injured, or someone has visa issues, whatever the case is, it's going to get cancelled again, and we know that. Regardless of what you think of the fight, regardless of what you think of, you know, how they're going to perform, you know, Khabib's return, it's going to sell pay-per-views, but at the same time, it's not going to happen. So we're going to put it on the prelim as a headliner, a cursed matchup. It's already happened before. It's already been booked multiple times before, fallen through every single time. So for that reason, I'm putting the prelim headliner as Khabib versus Ferguson. Absolute cursed matchup. Next fight, as the main card opener, we have Nasrat Haqparast and Derek Lewis versus Kelvin Gastelum and Rosenstrike. Now, the reason this is cursed is because, let's say there's a couple casuals watching the card, or you don't even have to be a casual. You could have known full well who Derek Lewis is, and, you know, Kelvin Gastelum. You could know every single fighter in this video, but regardless, you're not going to tell who's who. You've got Derek Lewis on one hand and Rosenstrike, who looks the exact same. And by the way, tell me how to say Rosenstrike's name. I always say Rosenstrike, but apparently it's pronounced differently. This guy's got such a dodgy name, but either way, Lewis versus Rosenstrike, they look the exact same. If these two were to ever fight in the heavyweight division, which actually can happen because they're not far away in the rankings, I'm not going to be able to tell who's who. And then you've got Nasrat on one hand and Gastelum on the other hand. Again, look the exact same. You put them in a tag team, it's cursed. It's a cursed matchup. If you're a casual watching this, let's say you've never watched a UFC card, or, you know, you're a casual, you don't really watch UFC that often, and you see Derek Lewis and Rosenstrike on the same team, and then you've got Nasrat, and not on the same team, but fighting each other, and then you've got Nasrat and Gastelum, you're going to be tripping out. You're going to be wondering what the hell's going on. And that's why I put it on the main card as an opener, because it's a cursed matchup. Regardless of what you think, it's a guaranteed finish, by the way. You've got Derek Lewis on one hand. You've got Kelvin Gastelum, who puts on an absolute war every time. I know we just got destroyed by Sean Brady, but there's no Sean Bradys in this matchup. You've got Rosenstrike, who's got underrated power as well. It's a guaranteed finish, but it's going to be confusing for the casual audience. It's a UFC tag team as well, which is cursed in itself, but you're never going to know who's fighting. So for that reason, I've put this as a main card opener, as a cursed matchup. Yeah, casual's worst nightmare, this fight. If you're a casual, or if you don't watch the UFC that often, to be fair, even I watch the UFC, right? And if these guys were fighting, unless I'm, you know, staring at the TV and I look at the shorts, I'm not going to know who's who. So for that reason, I've got this fight as the main card opener. Next fight number 2 of the card. We have Dana White versus Tito Ortiz. Now, this is another one of those fights that has actually been, well, it's not been booked, but it was actually supposed to happen before in, I believe, in boxing. Dana White, he asked Tito Ortiz to box. I think Tito actually turned it down. It might have been due to a weight issue, but Dana White versus Tito Ortiz. We need to see this fight. It almost happened. I want to see it again. I don't care how old Dana White is. I don't care how inexperienced Dana White is. I still believe strongly that Tito Ortiz would find a way to lose this fight against a guy that's as inexperienced as Dana White. Now, I believe Dana White has had boxing experience before, like years ago. But still, I want to see Dana White versus Tito Ortiz. It's a shame we never get to see Dana White in the octagon as the president of the UFC. I want to see him in an MMA fight against Tito Ortiz, or at least in a boxing fight. Now, Tito Ortiz, obviously, he's been a little bit active these past few years. Got a win over Alberto Del Rio. He's been doing his thing. Got knocked out by Anderson Silva. But let's see him versus Dana White. Now, I've also added coaches as well. We've got Coach Ryan Garcia with Dana White. Now, Dana White's inexperienced. He needs someone who's experienced. He needs a guy at the top level like Ryan Garcia coaching him, specifically in boxing if this is going to be a boxing match. And then on one hand for Tito Ortiz, listen, he's already learned it. He's past his prime. He's already, he's experienced it all. He doesn't need a new coach. He needs coach Oscar De La Hoya, if anything. Oscar De La Hoya, he can exchange him the bag. He can promote the fight because that's what De La Hoya's going to be here. De La Hoya hates Ryan Garcia, hates Dana White. He's going to be the perfect hype man and promoter of Tito Ortiz. Maybe that's an ultimate fighter itself. You've got Ryan Garcia and Oscar. So I've put Dana White versus Tito Ortiz. We need to see this fight. It's never happened. Let's stick it on the UFC 300 card. You've got the promoter actually fighting as well. You've got Oscar, you've got Ryan Garcia promoting, you've got Tito Ortiz back in the octagon, and I'm sure his promotion videos. By the way, Tito Ortiz is, I don't know what's up with him. The guy's one of the weirdest guys in the UFC, man. Well, he's not even in the UFC anymore, but he's still just a weird guy. But Tito versus Dana White on the main card of UFC 300. Let's see it. Fight number 2. Banger of a fight as well. Dana White by knockout. Featured fight of the night. I've gone with Chael Sonnen versus Jorge Masvidal. Again, another fight that could actually happen on the streets, on the mean streets of Westling, Oregon, or whether it's in Miami. If we see Masvidal versus Sonnen, I don't know what to think. I genuinely, because it could actually happen because it's not recent, but a couple of weeks ago, these guys have been going at it on Twitter. Chael Sonnen 1080'd him on Twitter. Obviously, it all started with the Ariel Helwani thing. Masvidal was trying to defend Ariel Helwani after Chael Sonnen had a go at him, and then from there, it just spiraled into this massive argument. So, Masvidal Sonnen, let's see it on UFC 300 as the featured fight. Masvidal's a big star. He deserves to be in the featured fight. He hasn't won a fight since 2019 against Nate Diaz, which was a doctor stoppage. But either way, I still want to see Masvidal and Sonnen. We will get to see the return of one of the greatest of all time, Chael Sonnen. He hasn't fought since, well, I don't even know, was it Bellator? He hasn't fought since Bellator. He needs to make a big comeback to the UFC and really make a statement on these guys. So I want to see Masvidal versus Sonnen in a featured fight. They've been going at it on Twitter. Why not? Maybe it could be in a street. Maybe this could be an exclusive fight just for the streets that's live on pay-per-view, because we've got Street Judas and then we've got Chael Sonnen who runs the streets. Masvidal versus Chael Sonnen. Now, people are going to think it's an unfair matchup. Not at all. You've got Chael Sonnen who has the press conference advantage. Chael Sonnen is going to destroy Masvidal in the press conference, right? Say what you want about the fight. When it comes to the press conference, Sonnen is destroying Masvidal. On top of that, you've got the weight advantage to Chael Sonnen. Masvidal's got the age advantage. He's slightly younger, even though he's getting in his 40s now. Let's see Sonnen versus Masvidal. UFC 300 is the featured fight. I'm not going to be mad. Core main event. Now, this is going to be a big fight. This has to be a big fight. It's got to be between a couple of stars. I've gone with Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira's son. The reason is, there's already a rivalry created. This rivalry has been going on since 2017 when Adesanya got knocked out by Pereira. Adesanya's son taunted, not Adesanya's son, Alex Pereira's son taunting as Adesanya, pretending to be knocked out. A couple years later, 2022, Adesanya, no, it's 2023 actually. I still can't believe that knockout was this year. 2023, Adesanya knocks out Pereira, does the same thing to Pereira's son. I can already feel the rivalry brewing. I already know they both want to smash each other's head in, so let's do Alex Pereira's son versus Israel Adesanya. Now, people are going to say it's a mismatch. Listen, Alex Pereira's son is really young. Adesanya's got all this experience. How is this how is this fair? Well, I think there's a new mythical fighter, Coach Pereira. Coach Pereira, if he coaches his son, his son might actually manage to sleep, Adesanya. He coached Strickland. Strickland goes out there and goes in his best performance and dominates Adesanya. Maybe we can see the same thing with Alex Pereira's son against Adesanya. Adesanya gets destroyed by Alex Pereira's son. We have a new middleweight contender in the middleweight division. Adesanya's retirement fight, but at the same time, it's a chance of redemption for Adesanya. They're both 1-1. They both mocked each other once. It's a big chance of redemption, a massive rivalry that's been going on for a while. It's the closest thing Adesanya can get to Pereira. I can't speak today. It's the closest thing that Adesanya can get to Pereira, which is Pereira's son. Let's book it. Co-main event for UFC 300, and we need to see this fight. It's been going on for a while. I'm sick of it. I don't want this rivalry to go away. We need to see the fight. And the main event, this, again, a fight that could actually happen. Mark Zuckerberg versus Elon Musk. Now, I don't know if this is still going to happen. I heard Mark Zuckerberg got injured. Elon Musk doesn't really seem interested anymore, but I still want to see this fight. UFC 300 main event. This would be one of the biggest fights of all time. I don't care if you're a UFC fan or you've never watched a fight in your life. You're tuning in. You've got the two richest men in the world, Mark and Elon, fighting it. You've got Twitter versus Facebook, the whole war of social media. If we actually break down the fight, though, you've got Mark Zuckerberg on one hand, who's been training BJJ consistently. You know, he's been training with people like Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, UFC world champions, MMA coaches. He's eager to fight. He wants to get in there. He even said after his injury he wants to fight. And on the other hand, you've got Elon Musk, and the advantage he has is that he's actually human. So it's kind of like a human versus reptile fight, but I want to see this fight on UFC 300. I just want to see this fight in general. Imagine the eyes that would be brought to the UFC if this fight happened. Easy 1 million pay-per-views. I don't care if the rest of the card is absolutely terrible. This is an easy 1 million pay-per-views. Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg. Everyone knows who they are. Put them in a fight at the main event of UFC 300. And that, for me, is an absolutely cursed, but kind of a fantasy UFC 300 card. Let me know your thoughts on the card. Would you buy this pay-per-view? Personally, I'm throwing my money. I'm buying this pay-per-view, 100%. But yeah, just let me know your thoughts on it, and thank you for watching.